Okay. Good evening. My name is Tony Hunt. I am the Vice Chairperson of the Webster Groves Plan Commission. We are a 9-member Board of Citizens appointed by the City Council to review development proposals and make recommendations to the City Council regarding future development of the city. In addition to the members of the Plan Commission participating in person and via teleconference, we have a few other representatives of the city I would like to introduce. Council Member Alexander, Acting City Attorney Peter Boontrager, Planning and Development Director Mara Perry, and Denise Bolesky, our Recording Secretary. I would like to welcome all of you to tonight's monthly meeting of the Commission and take this opportunity to explain how we operate. As indicated in our agenda, we will begin with the regular session of the meeting when we will hear new applications for rezoning or subdivisions. We will hear a staff report and the applicant will explain the proposal. We will then ask for comments from the public. At that time, anyone with an interest in the proposal may indicate to city staff that they have a question or would like to express their opinion. To make sure that we accurately record your name, we ask that you fill out a speaker card if you are in person and turn it in to Ms. Perry. If you are online on Zoom, please click on the raise hand feature on your Zoom. To make sure that we accurately record your name, we ask that you identify your full name and address at the beginning of your comment, either in person or on Zoom. When you make your comments, we ask that you be as concise as possible and not repeat a point made by a previous speaker. We also ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. One person who is a spokesperson for an organization may have 6 minutes to comment. After all citizens have spoken, the applicant will be asked to respond to any question that have been raised during the hearing. When we have finished reviewing one proposal, we will move on to the next application. Comments concerning items not on the agenda should be made during the public comment section of the agenda near the beginning of the meeting. When we have completed the regular portion of the agenda, we will go into executive session. And at that time, the commission will discuss the proposal and may decide to vote on the application or to postpone the decision. You are welcome to remain and listen to the discussion, but there will be no additional opportunity for public comment. Our recommendations are sent to the City Council. In most cases, the City Council will conduct a similar hearing and must enact an ordinance before the proposal is finally approved. If the Plan Commission takes a vote tonight, the City Council will likely take up this issue at its first meeting next month. If you want information regarding our vote or the progress of the application, you may contact the city staff at City Hall. I would like to ask the Secretary read the first item for tonight's regular meeting.
Approval of minutes, May 2nd, 2022.
Any questions? No questions? Entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Read the next item, please.
Oh,
No, you gotta
have a
vote.
motion and a
Got to
second.
vote.
Oh, gotta vote. Sorry. I'm gonna vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
I think that was an aye.
Yeah, it was her eye from the first.
Okay. Okay. The minutes have been approved. Item number 3.
Public comment.
Do we have any?
This is the time on the agenda to speak about anything that's not, or a time on the agenda or time in the meeting to speak about something that's not on the agenda for this evening.
Do we have any speakers?
I don't see any hands raised, and no one is here at council chambers that is not for an item that's already on.
Okay. Public hearing. We have no public hearings tonight. Number 5.
Plats and site plans. 22 PC 02 Narix Hall STEM Edition, 530 East Lockwood Avenue. An application by Christner Architects on behalf of Narix Hall for an 8,100 square foot STEM edition in compliance with the EC2 Educational Campus Zoning District regulations on an approximately 11.04 acre tract of land located at 530 East Lockwood Avenue.
So I will be presenting this evening. Just as a reminder, it's been a while since we've had a site plan. Site plans do not require a public hearing. So this will simply be a brief report by staff about how the proposed site development plan meets the regulations in the code. And then it then allows for the Plan Commission to vote on that site plan. So the site plan, as you can see here, the zoning is EC2, Educational Campus District. This is probably only, I think, the second or third site plan that we've had since we did the rezoning to the EC2 for all of the different campuses within the city of Webster Groves. Here's a brief history. Narix Hall High School has been on the property at 530 East Lockwood since 1924. Because of the fact that the educational use for a secondary school is a permitted use in what had been originally residentially zoned property, there was virtually nothing that was needed over the years as Narix continued to do additions and other things on their campus. In December of 2006, they did have a CUP approved for an accessory parking lot that was on the south side of Garden Avenue, outside of the main portion of their campus. In January 2015, the city undertook the new educational campus zoning districts, and the property was rezoned to an EC2 educational campus district. In 2019, one of the original buildings that was on the campus was demolished, and the first phase of a multi-phase project was started. That included in 2021, the northern parking lot and access onto the property was rebuilt. The proposal meets uses that are allowed within the EC2 Educational Campus Zoning District. It will have classrooms as well as additional restrooms and will be connected into the existing main structure of the building. Parking is based on a composite of different uses within the educational facilities that add up to an overall amount of required parking. Due to the fact that we knew that the campus was going through multiple phases, when they came in for their first parking lot project back in 2021, we looked at the overall number to understand what they were going to have for future uses coming down as they continued with their progress of this multi-phase project. So the parking was not of a concern because they had been building the parking ahead of time for this addition and some future additions to the campus. You can see, though, we did go ahead and do a quick accounting of existing spaces that were on the site. There is the lot to the north, which was recently redone, has 108 parking spaces. The existing surface lot to the south has 104, which gives them 212 existing spaces on the site. They also lease, when they had the CUP for the parking lot across the street at Garden, that parking lot was then taken over by Webster University when they built their expansion on the parking garage, and an agreement was made so that Narix could have parking in the lowest level of the garage that's dedicated to their particular campus. So they have 105 parking spaces in the garage across the street. They also lease another 26 spaces to the north from the church. So they do have an existing and leased spaces which total up to 343 parking spaces, which does meet the needs of the facility, as well as meets future needs for some future phases. We did look and ensure that it met all of the dimensional regulations. So checking that it met the setbacks on the property, which are nowhere near where this addition is going, making sure that it met the height, which is only 1 story, and they're allowed to go to multiple stories. The overall lot area and lot coverage. One of the things that's always important to look at is there is a requirement of open space, and the overall amount of open space is being met and exceeded, but we just wanted to give a quick accounting of where they were on it. It puts their open space at 48.28%, and they have to keep at least 30% of open space.
Mayor?
Yes, Mike.
Mayor, I had a question on the open space. How'd the open space versus green space, or how did they relate? Are they the same or different? Or?
So in the EC Educational Campus District, the open space is for green areas that are not paved and are not impervious surfaces, which is slightly different from the single family residential. And I know we've had some conversations about updating that in our code in the future. But when we did do the EC Educational Campus Zoning District, the open space in that particular chapter does include all of their open, basically their green spaces. So in that case, it's a little bit different than what you normally would see.
One other question kind of related to that. Thank you. That explains that. I noticed on some of the plans, there's a future development area marked and some of the plans submitted by the engineer or the applicant.
Yes, they've been looking ahead and helping us to understand what their future phases are, but they're not in at this time for any of the other future locations.
Thank you.
Tree preservation and landscaping, when they came in to do the parking lot, they did do an overall tree preservation plan to help us understand the amount of trees that they're required to keep on the property, what were going to be impacted during construction, and then any future landscaping and how that would equal to the amount that they had to plant back for any that they might have been taking out. That just needs to be updated, and we'll be doing a full review during the building permit plan approval process. But essentially at this point in time, they are meeting the conceptual landscaping that is required, as well as meeting the tree preservation requirements for the district. Architectural elevations, in order to keep them moving, we did go ahead and have them go before the Architectural Review Board a couple meetings ago to get preliminary feedback on the elevations. They got that preliminary feedback, and then on Thursday of last week, we allowed them to go ahead and go before the Architectural Review Board for full approval, with the understanding that the site plan did still need to be approved, but they did get full approval by the Architectural Review Board. The Architectural Review Board did note they thought it was a very nice addition to the campus. So recommendation is approval of the site development plan for the STEM addition for Narix Hall at 530 East Lockwood. Any questions?
No questions?
Okay.
No one online?
So just for anyone who's listening, the next part we will do is we would vote, you would all vote on it once we go to executive session.
Okay. All right. Next item, well, it's the last item. So do I have a motion to adjourn the regular session?
Make a motion to move to executive session.
Second.
Second.
The vote?
Aye.
Ayes? Ayes?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Noes? Okay. Go into executive session.
Executive session 22 PC 02 Narix Hall STEM Edition 530 East Lockwood Avenue, an application by Krishna Architects on behalf of Narix Hall for an 8,100 square foot STEM addition in compliance with the EC2 Educational Campus Zoning District regulations on approximately 11.04 acre tract of land located at 530 East Lockwood Avenue.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Motion to approve.
So move.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, we don't need to do a voice on that. Okay. Next item,
You're done.
other business.
Thank
You.
Yeah, other business.
So we're gonna do the training as part of the regular meeting.
We're going to do the training as part of the executive session,
Okay.
just because then we've, that's the next item on the agenda.
Okay, next item is other business. Planning Commission training.
Yep. So I did go ahead and send these or link the slides for all of you in the packet. I know a couple people had mentioned that, so we have two of our members are not on this evening, but they had mentioned that they had gone ahead and reviewed ahead of time. I'm going to go through the slides. Please feel free to interrupt if there's any comments or questions or anything that you might have, but we will just go ahead and kind of walk our way through this. So I usually try to talk through a little bit about how our plan commission got established, talk a little bit about what the comprehensive plan is, what it means to you, and how it impacts how you operate. I then wanted to talk a little bit about zoning and special procedures, then a little bit about plating and development regulations when it comes to site plans, a little bit more about the role of the plan commission and role of staff. And then our city attorney will talk a little bit about some legal matters. So we will just go ahead and kick our way along. So the first thing that's important to note is Chapter 89 of the Missouri State Statute identifies that any municipality of the state may make, adopt, amend, and carry out a city plan and appoint a planning commission with the powers and duties set forth. And one of those powers, which is most important, is the plan commission shall make and adopt a city plan for the physical development of the municipality. That is essentially the key, most important thing from the state level that comes down to the cities that talks about creating this plan commission and how you operate. The City of Webster Grove's charter says there shall be a city plan commission established and operated in the manner consistent with the controlling statutory or common law of the state of Missouri. So again, kind of references back and forth between the two. The Webster Grove City Code says citizens qualified by knowledge or experience to act on questions pertaining to the development of the city should be appointed to the Plan Commission. And so when we get to that, we talk about what's the role of the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission is supposed to have the full authority to advise the City Council. So you're a board that advises the council. The council appoints you as members to help advise them. And it's on all planning and zoning matters so that it covers the comprehensive plan, which is the main item that comes under the state statute, but it also talks about all other planning and zoning matters. So site development plans that might come forth, conditional use permits, making amendments to the zoning code, making amendments to other codes within the city that have to have a public hearing. All of those elements come through. It also has the importance that you're not limited to the zoning power over property of persons, corporations, institutions, churches, or other entities that to the fullest extent permitted by the constitutions of Missouri and the United States. So it helps to have the idea that you have zoning power and that you use that to move that forward to our city council with recommendations. It also talks about that you have the power and authority to make recommendations for modification of the city's master plan for the physical development of the city, which is our comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is one of the most important elements that we work with, and it provides a guiding document for the city. It helps citizens understand what can and cannot happen around them on their own property and on the property surrounding them and throughout the city. So I like to put sometimes a little bit on of what planners are supposed to do, what we're responsible for. Planning is the act of setting goals and the consideration of various courses of action for achieving those goals. So creating codes that help us understand how to meet certain goals of how we want the city to develop, understanding the goals of how the development of the city can impact our citizens, and it brings everything sort of together. I always think about planning, how it covers a number of things that people aren't aware of. It covers so many things when it comes to environmental issues, social issues, economic issues, and all of it sort of comes together in one. It talks on here a little bit more. Planners are responsible for the implementation and enforcement of the strategies, goals, and plans of the city. They're responsible for knowing the latest in state and federal legislation, case law, and how those relate to a particular plan, project, or process. So many times we'll have things that come forward and we need to be aware if the state has made some restrictions on things that we can do within the city. Those come to us and we, using our legal help to understand what we can and cannot do. Especially when it comes to things like, for example, sign codes. Sign codes have so many things that happen on the federal level that we need to be aware of to ensure that we are enforcing what we're allowed to enforce and not more than that. So those can come into play when we deal with a lot of different things related to zoning, planning, the codes in the city. So one of the things that I always talk about is, why do we plan? We can plan for many different things. It helps it helps us save money when it comes to on infrastructure, service costs, thinking about mobility, thinking about walkability. All of those things can help within the community. Setting expectations. It helps provide some ground rules for development and what are accepted standards. So if someone comes in, we have a set of standards that if a developer comes in with something that maybe the community isn't interested in having built within the community, that the standards are already in place that help guide what could go in that particular area. It improves the economic development and quality of life. Businesses want to locate where people want to live. And I think many of you will see that even during COVID, when things slowed down, we continued to get new businesses in. We had very many businesses who did manage to stay open despite everything that was going on. So people want to go and be where people want to live. So it helps us in the overall community. It also connects people to the community. So the architecture and the elements can establish a sense of place. Many people will say, that certain areas are very reflective of what they think Webster Groves looks like, or what it feels like. Our front porches, the sidewalks, and some of the walkability that we have. There's a lot of elements that bring people together within the community and help connect people, one another, to each other. Also helps with conserving resources. If we can find ways to preserve our cultural resources or some of our natural resources, whether it's our city parks, whether it's different areas of green space or open space, whether it's our historic structures or historic districts. So bringing those all together. So what are your duties when it comes to bringing all these things together? One of your primary duties is to review and amend the zoning code as needed. Many times you'll see staff will bring recommendations to you. Some of those have come from the council. Some of them have come from us bringing something to the council and the council saying, yes, we're interested in you moving that forward. We've also in the past, as we've been working on one particular code amendment, something else has come up that sparked an idea about something else we need to address. So reviewing and amending the zoning code as needed is an important element. And you usually see we do 2 to 3 code amendments probably every year. Zoning and the zoning map. We review and act upon zoning requests and conditional use permits. There haven't been very many in the last year. We've kind of slowed down when it comes to rezonings and CUPs. One of the things that we did do is we tried to make some changes, and some of you were on the Planning Commission at the time, to not require CUPs for things that seem to be natural items that uses that would make sense to be where they are in a particular zoning area. So for example, multifamily housing used to be a conditional use permit in the D district and wasn't even a use in the C district. We made that a permitted use as long as it met some certain parameters that were already set in the code. So we are seeing less conditional use permits, I think, come in for a couple of those items. And we also haven't been seeing as many conditional use permits because many times when a restaurant space would turn over and a new restaurant would come in Old Webster, a CUP was required. Our businesses have been super stable. We haven't had a bunch of those come in. Our gas stations have not changed ownership. They have had the same ownership. So a lot of the things that we've been seeing kind of coming in and out over a number of years have been very, very stable, and we haven't seen very much of them. But typically you would see zonings and zoning map amendments. Subdivisions. You also haven't seen very many of these in a while. So subdivisions, those are plats that come before you all, and then they go to the city council. A few that you've seen in the last couple years have been where someone wants to do a boundary adjustment plat, but because they can't meet the regulations of that plat, they've had to come through a full subdivision plat because that's the only way that they can get any variances before the council. So we have not really seen very many subdivision plats come through, but a couple of them have been kind of unusual. You're also supposed to review the comprehensive plan and make amendments as necessary for the future development of the community. This is one of the most difficult ones because when it comes to reviewing the comprehensive plan and when it comes to amending the comprehensive plan, that doesn't involve a much more extensive process. That involves a process in engaging the community, holding public hearings. All of those elements require a lot of time on the part of both the Plan Commission, city staff, as well as making sure that you can reach out to the community. So the comprehensive plan, which I'm going to go into a little bit of detail in a little bit, the comprehensive plan last had an amendment before the Plan Commission for the map only in 2017. We really are due to have an amendment, and we've been talking with the city manager about options for how we could move forward to do an amendment of the comprehensive plan. Some cities go out for RFPs and hire someone when it can't be done by staff. Some cities do just partial sections of the comprehensive plan. Ours, because the main bulk of it is from 1978, really needs to be completely rewritten and looked at. So that is something that's going to be coming forth to you, I would hope, in the very near future. So this talks a little bit about one of the most vital roles of the Plan Commission is the responsibility for the comprehensive plan of the city. That comprehensive plan serves as the guide for development and growth and the vision of what you want the city to become. It's a document that's created through the Plan Commission and public engagement. It is not a legislative act. It provides the citizens with a reasonable expectation of future land use development and community growth. So when someone looks at the comprehensive plan and they look at where they're living and they look at the properties surrounding them, if the properties surrounding them show that they will remain as a residential use, they should expect that they will not have a gas station come in and ask to rezone to commercial and it be approved, because then it would not be in conformance with that overall guiding direction for the city.
And Mara, can I add?
Yes.
That it's not, it's even stronger than that, because the comprehensive plan actually provides the power of the commission. Everything that you do zoning is based off the planning that the city has already set in place and that you set in place. And so if you zone against what has already been planned and against what the comprehensive plan says, that's when we create legal problems for the city.
Thank you very much. Yes,
Was
that's
that
much.
Peter?
That's Peter.
Mara,
Uh,
Mara, I had a question related to the plan. You talked about it's due to be updated. Is there I thought there were legal requirements at the state level that it be updated on a regular basis, 5-10 years or something like that. But I know it's been quite a while since ours has been looked at. So
So
is
it
there
is-
a regulatory rule there?
It's good planning practice to review your comprehensive plan every 5 to 10 years. What they typically say for smaller communities or communities that, you know, are basically built out, reviewing that plan and just stating that it is fine as it is just as important as completely trying to reopen it all up. So when we did go and look at the map in 2017, that was something essentially 5 years ago. So that's why we are probably due. Even though the main bulk of the document was 1978, there was a process of looking at some portions of it in 2006. And that was looking at the commercial areas, because it was determined at that time that the residential areas really didn't need to be readdressed, that they were staying essentially the same as the previous plan had guided it. And if you look at a number of the past comprehensive plans, very little has changed in our comprehensive plan, because again, we are a built out community. We have some very specific areas of commercial. We have some very specific areas of residential. And so in a way, simply opening up and looking at it as a commission and determining that there isn't a need to make amendments at this time is kind of counts as having that review in a timely manner. Mike, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
And I think we've done a good job of, for lack of a better word, tweaking areas that we needed. Like when we had the home, there was home occupations, or if we had the short-term rentals and things like that. So we've been able to adapt to some of the, things that have come up in the last 20 years. But after seeing what's happened over the last, 2 years, some of those uses in residential areas, I think probably do need to be reviewed and updated. So.
Yes, staff would completely agree.
That tweaking, I guess, was kind of something that confused me with my understanding of the state code, and going back to what Peter said, if the zoning's supposed to be based on the code, right? That gives you part of zone, because the zoning should follow the comprehensive plan. So how do you get kind of the right, so to speak, to go in and just look at parts of it without going and look at the whole thing?
So I think you're confusing a couple things with one another. So we have not made any changes to the comprehensive plan without public hearings. Public hearings were held in 2006, and at that time, changes were made to the comprehensive plan. Since then, the only thing that someone might say we tweaked, which we did not tweak, is that we combined the maps from the 1978 document and the 2006 document, because those maps were done in a very different format from one another, and we made those formats match each other. So in 2017, we made the formats match each other, and we had that document continue to stay. We have not rezoned anything against the comprehensive plan. So we have not tweaked the comprehensive plan from that standpoint. And when it comes to making changes to the zoning code, are elements that you should be making on a regular basis to keep up with changes in technology or changes in how people just operate in general. That's not making a change or going against the comprehensive plan.
We also have done area studies, but we've never incorporated the recommendations from those studies into the comprehensive plan to make them official also.
That is correct. So when the city council looked at the amendments in 2006, only the maps were adopted, and none of the actual document from 2006 was adopted with the 1978 comprehensive plan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, so the comprehensive plan is supposed to be broad and general in scope. So when it covers something like single family residential, it does not specify A1, A2, A3, or A4. When it talks about multifamily, it doesn't specify whether it's a B1 or a B2 or a PC that includes multifamily. It's supposed to include the opportunity for the different zoning categories to be incorporated in terms of what is surrounding it and trying to be consistent with the fabric or pattern of the community. It includes policies, but not specific regulations. Our zoning code includes the specific regulations. It's supposed to be developed with significant public participation. Back in 2006, there were a number of public meetings. The document did have a whole accounting of all those meetings and the feedback that came from those meetings. And then we wrote on here is updated or revisited every 7 to 10 years. Sometimes 5 years is important. And so it just depends on good planning practice would be more like 5 years, which we're right at 5 years from our last map amendment. For the city of Webster Groves, the comprehensive plan, we have a comprehensive plan from 1958, a comprehensive plan from 1966, a comprehensive plan from 1978. It's been reviewed. I found some minutes from other meetings of the Plan Commission over subsequent years, but no additional amendments were made. The Development Foundation Plan held meetings in 2005 and 2006. It was a series of meetings to get feedback in order to move forward with just focusing on commercial areas. So they had focus areas on Old Webster, Old Orchard, Crossroads, an area along Watson, and an area along Kirkham, Brentwood. So those were the focus areas that they looked at, because in general, they felt that the rest of the community was already pretty much built out, that was going in the direction that had been guided. And if you do look at the 58, 66, and 78 plan, they're very, very similar. There's almost no changes between them. So I wrote drawing done in 1917. That was supposed to be 2017. So the drawing for the map was done in 2017. We combined the maps from 1978 comprehensive plan and the Development Foundation Plan. It was adopted by the City Plan Commission and then later the City Council. So again, 2017, not 1917. Zoning is a process by which a community is divided into district or zones. And actually, before I get into this, any other questions about the comprehensive plan?
I just, you mentioned the potential at some point to write an RFP and have somebody help us revamp. How would we fit into that process as the Plan Commission?
So typically when an RFP goes out and a consultant is hired, we work into that meetings that they have, potentially sometimes subcommittees with members of the Plan Commission. And then they would make presentations to you as the Plan Commission about their recommendations. You would be invited to attend any and all meetings, and then they would make a recommendation to all of you for approval of some final document, some comprehensive plan document. Any other questions on Plan Commission, or sorry, on comprehensive plan? Okay. So then when we get into zoning, zoning is a process by which a community is divided into districts or zones. They're shown on a map, and each of them has a different set of allowable uses and dimensional and development standards. Many times as you're looking at what uses make sense next to one another, the comprehensive plan starts to guide how those uses make sense next to one another. You get usually the intensity of residential gets more intense as it gets closer to what would be maybe a commercial area or the beginnings of a commercial area. In a lot of areas and in older cities that naturally formed without necessarily some of the zoning, you will see that you'll have residential, goes into some multifamily, that then transitions into the beginning or of your commercial, whether it's service uses, that then sort of transitions into your more intense uses, your restaurants, your high intensity retail. And so those are sort of the natural formation of how the districts sort of land around and near each other. A lot of changes have happened over the last few years with uses like short-term rentals, uses like home occupations, many of the different things that people are doing when it comes to trying to operate in a very different kind of setting, when it comes to incubator type businesses or people who share different spaces in different ways. But we always want to think about that when we look at both the comprehensive plan and then our zoning districts. Oops. It's changed on one, but not the other. There we go. So zoning petitions, when they come in, are a request for a zoning map amendment. So when they come in and say, I would like to rezone to a PC planned commercial, this map, which is the zoning map, which is different from the comprehensive plan map, will get changed. There will actually be a change in whatever, if it gets approved, the color of the area that's assigned on the particular map. Again, we look at the comprehensive plan to make sure that it's in conformance with that. But you'll see in the map before the comprehensive plan map, there were less colors to it. All of the residential single family were all in one color of yellow on the comprehensive plan map. Over here, you're going to see there's an A1, A2, A3, A4. We also have multiple family zoning districts. We have multiple commercial and industrial districts. We have our various educational campus districts, and then our planned districts, our planned commercial and our PEU. So many of these you'll see there aren't a huge number of changes over time. Sometimes we'll get 2 or 3 zoning petitions, but when a conditional use permit comes through, it does not make a change to the map. Only a zoning request, rezoning request makes a change to the map. So when we look at zoning requirements and a change of zoning request, we have a couple different options for when the change of zoning comes in. A change of zoning can come in as a straight zoning. We've only had, I think, 1 of those in the last maybe 5 or 6 years. When a straight zoning comes in, it means that they are zoning, for example, if it's currently zoned to an A1 and they want to subdivide the property into smaller lots and the surrounding zoning around them matches that, they can come in and rezone to a similar zoning category. It's a straight zoning category, and as long as it meets all the regulations that the lots can meet the minimum size requirements and width requirements and other things like that, they can rezone to that straight zoning district. There's no special ordinance with requirements and additional regulations. They just follow everything in the zoning code. If someone wants to come in with a planned district, that's when it gets a little more complex. Follows a development plan that's approved by the Plan Commission. It's then forwarded to the City Council with a series of regulations and an ordinance, and they have to follow that ordinance. That ordinance is in addition to everything else in the city code. So we don't rewrite everything. We will say you still have to follow all the building codes, or you still have to follow everything in tree preservation and landscaping, but we would only put in things that either go above and beyond or are special for that plan district. When we do things with a change of zoning, we hold a public hearing at the Plan Commission and we hold a public hearing at the City Council. This isn't the same for a lot of communities. Many communities only hold their public hearings at the Plan Commission. They focus all of that recommendations. They only hold it at the Plan Commission level. And then after those recommendations go to the City Council votes upon it. Our community for decades and decades and decades has always had both hearings at both levels. And we've continued to operate in that way. But over the last maybe 6 to 7 years, we have made some changes so that there are a few procedures that were pretty onerous on new businesses coming in or pretty onerous on applicants, that the time frame that it took to go to both Plan Commission and City Council when it was simply a change of ownership and they were going to follow everything in the ordinance, we made some of those simplified so it goes just to City Council. A gas station that's changing ownership, but it has agreed to operate under everything that's already under the CUP, that goes straight to City Council for a hearing and can move forward with an approval. We did also make some changes that there were some that didn't even need to go to City Council for approval. They could be staff approved. And we also have special procedures, conditional use procedures and planned environment unit procedure. The last time I gave this presentation, I had to try to explain what planned environment unit procedure was because we hadn't had one. We've now had one. So both the planned environment unit procedure and the conditional use procedure, those are ones that go through the Plan Commission and then they go to City Council for approval.
Mara,
Yes.
can you maybe, you kind of touched on this, but what is the intent for public hearings at both settings? It seems like it would be duplicative.
It is very duplicative. And so again, I came from another community before this where we only did the public hearing at Plan Commission level. When I came here, I was pretty surprised. And I do say to the applicants all the time, I'm like, well, my staff will make a presentation at the Plan Commission and then I will make a presentation at City Council. I don't think anyone has really wanted to take it from one area or the other at this point, mainly because, again, it's been done this way for so long. There are many people who feel that their voice is only heard at city council, so they wait to just speak at city council and they don't come to plan commission.
Well, it undermines the process, doesn't it?
It does. It can be very frustrating because especially if you all review something, you have important information that you've reviewed, you've made recommendations. When it then gets to council, if suddenly someone comes out of the woodwork that hasn't been there before and now is asking for something else to be changed, the city council has the ability to send it back to plan commission. We haven't really had to do that in recent times, but it's very duplicative.
Mara, just to add to that as well,
Yeah.
one of the things that we consider in talking about both public hearings is that if the person who is seeking the change ultimately feels aggrieved enough and decides they want to appeal this to the court's review is going to be of city council's action. And so there's a reason why you'd have that hearing again, and it's complicated, and there's just a really long ruling that came out of the Eastern District of Missouri dealing with it. But it essentially, by having the public hearing again in front of the city council, it makes it a contested hearing. If it were simply a review and then a vote yes or no on the planning commission's action, it would be an uncontested hearing. And the rules change, and it actually makes it more difficult for the city to defend at the circuit court level if it's an uncontested hearing. So there is a benefit to it. It doesn't come up very often, and I know every time the city council has to review it, so there's kind of a cost benefit there that could be done, but there is a good reason to do so.
Also, the planning commission reviews petitions based on a different set of criteria than city council, though, too. I mean, planning commission is looking at the planning, whether it meets comprehensive plan, and so their recommendation to the city council is based on those merits. City council can take into consideration other issues, can't they?
I would go to Peter on that one. My understanding, everyone should be looking at the same set of criteria and regulations because it's the same process. It's the same process.
So that's all driven by ordinance. It all depends on the specific city and the specific language of the city. So I'd have to check exactly and I've not sat through one of the city council's reviews of it, and so I'd have to double check, but I don't think the standards are that much different. Let me check and I'll get back to you if you don't mind.
I also think it's because St. Louis County does it that way.
Oh, they go through too?
I believe so.
Oh, I don't know if I've paid attention to county.
Yeah. There's a lot of, well, if St. Louis County does it this way, then we should do it this way.
Hopefully that sort of answers that question.
It answers it, but
Yeah, so I will tell you again, when I first came here, I was like, this is crazy. Why are we doing public hearings at both levels? We should do it at just one. I got some baby steps happening where I was able to get it so that the CUPs didn't have to go through twice for certain elements. We did do a couple other minor changes just to try to make sure that the process was pretty clear in the zoning code. But there are other communities that do it the same as us, and there's other communities that do it differently.
Is it also because planning commission is making a recommendation? I mean, we're making an approval, but it is just a recommendation.
It is just
To
a
the council.
recommendation. And again, some cities, after the recommendation comes from plan commission, some cities have like a subcommittee of council, not all the council members. And they have like a planning and zoning subcommittee that then reviews and goes through it all again so that they can, make sure that they understand what's coming from the planning commission. And then when it gets to city council, they just hold the hearing, like they just open it up. And if the public still wants to comment, the public can comment, but they don't have a full public hearing.
I'm sorry, this is
Yeah.
totally blowing my mind. So I have just a couple of questions.
Yeah.
What is the governance that drives that double hearing?
Actually, it is our zoning code. Our zoning code has had for, I think, going all the way back to the 1950s, the requirement for the hearings before both.
Yeah, and
So we could look at it and potentially change it.
Yes.
Okay. Not saying that we should. I'm just saying, I'm just putting the pieces together.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it was something that I brought up initially. There was some conversations about that of like, why do we have it at both? And again, there's cities that do it both ways. So I don't think that anyone feels that one's particularly better than the other, but obviously there are some legal implications about, at which point does the record get set in case someone does want to appeal the decision that's been made. And so that would be something we would want to be very specifically aware of if we would make a recommendation to make that change. But we did a couple years ago when we made the change to try to shorten the CUP process and other things, we moved all of that into its own section on how you make amendments, how someone comes back. Like if someone comes back, let's just say the PEU gets approved and then they move forward and they want to make a minor change, determining when it has to come all the way back to Planning Commission again and start the process all over, and when it can go straight to City Council for a more minor amendment. And so there's a lot of conversations about keeping that process moving for people who come in. You don't want to make the process so onerous that no one wants to come and do something within the community. But at the same time, you want to make sure that that process is as open as possible for the community to come in and comment.
Thank you.
So here's a little bit about permitted uses versus conditional uses. So permitted uses are uses allowed by right within the zoning district. So we have a chart that has very specifically all the permitted uses that are allowed within the various districts. A few years back when we were cleaning up the code, instead of having a list of those uses, some of them in big paragraphs that just like said retail uses, including, and it would be like a whole slew of all these different uses. We created a chart with definitions of those uses. And that chart is pretty clear. It's easier to read, and we made that amendment in the code for the zoning code. One of the things that's important to note is when someone comes into me and says, hey, I'm interested in doing this particular business. And if that particular business doesn't automatically seem like it falls under that use, we always talk about, is it very likely close in nature? So for example, we have Dancing Academy. It's been in the code for quite a while. Dancing Academy essentially means classes of some nature, of a group, movements of classes, but a grouping of classes. So we have called in the past, Dancing Academy could also include a Pilates studio. It could also include a karate studio. It could include other things that might not be very specifically written in, but that are close in nature. But if someone comes in and says, well, I want to do a tattoo parlor. And I say, well, tattoo parlor is a conditional use permit in this district. But they say, but it has a use here that says, general body services or services like hair salon. And they say, but I should fall under hair salon. If there is a use that is in there specifically, you have to follow the regulations of what that use is. When it comes to conditional use permits, the use is not allowed as a matter of right, but it's a use that might naturally work well within that district. So for example, religious facilities are conditional uses in residential. You naturally find churches, synagogues, other religious facilities within a residential neighborhood. It forms a place for communities to gather. Many times it forms sort of a nucleus for a neighborhood, but they also have parking intense parking on certain times of the week. They might cause other things when it comes to looking at traffic and other things within the community. So it's not allowed as a matter of right, but it is something that makes sense that could possibly go within that particular district. So it is listed as a conditional use permit, so it can come before the Plan Commission and you can make determinations on whether it makes sense, that it's not going to cause traffic hazards or congestion or any detriment to the community or overtax the utilities that are within that area. So again, a conditional use permit can provide flexibility within the zoning ordinance, and it can also help you control certain uses which might have had a detrimental effect on the community. So under conditional use permit procedures, the conditional use permit request comes in. It's separate from the underlying zoning. We go through a approval of the use itself with a public hearing at City Planning Commission and a public hearing at City Council. The factors that are considered and are listed in the ordinance as being considered by the City Council are that this use does not substantially increase traffic hazards or congestion, substantially increase fire hazards, adversely affect the character of the neighborhood, adversely affect the general welfare of the community, or overtax public utilities. When the Plan Commission reviews it, you review it under those same factors and bring forth a recommendation to the City Council so that they can review under those same factors again. Sometimes there's been some confusion about, the affect the character of the community. And I know that that can be a question. Many times there's a conversation about looking at you all acting as representatives of the community as a whole, not representing your personal thoughts on or interest on whether you think that that is going to adversely affect the character of the neighborhood. You have to take into account any people that come to speak about what their concerns are, and think about that as not being your personal sort of recommendations of what you like or don't like about a particular business or religious facility or an institution. Before I jump to variances, any questions about rezonings, CUPs? Okay. So variances to the zoning code. The Board of Adjustment handles the variances to the zoning code, but it's important for you to know about this, even though it's a different board. They handle a couple different things. They handle errors where they believe that me or one of my staff have made an error in our determination or judgment in regards to the code. There's variations, and those variations are where the strict application of the regulations of the zoning code would result in a peculiar or exceptional practical difficulty to or exceptional and undue hardship upon the property owner. So there's a lot of conversation when someone comes forth to ask for this of, what really is that practical difficulty? What really is that hardship? Because it's not supposed to be personal to the person. It's supposed to be related to the land. What is it about the land and the configuration of that lot that's exceptional or different than other lots around the community or other lots in that general area or neighborhood that makes it very difficult for them to use what everybody else has to use in terms of the regulations of the zoning code? And then the last thing that they can do is exceptions. There are some very specific exceptions in the code that relate to, we did make a change in the parking ordinance to allow for reductions in parking, but before those reductions were added to the parking code, in order to get a reduction in parking, you had to go before the Board of Adjustment for an exception. There's a couple other exceptions in that section. It's used very, very infrequently. So basically appealing the staff decision and errors, we see maybe 1 or 2 of those a year. Some of those are actually trying to determine an error against the building code versus the zoning code. That's actually probably half of the ones where they believe we've made an error in our judgment. And then the rest of them are related to variations. We do try to see if we see a preponderance of a particular type of variance, we try to see if maybe there's a reason for that and that we should make a change to the zoning code. We did look at that when we made some amendments to the fence codes a number of years ago. There were a lot of people coming in where they had like a double frontage lot. So we made some changes to the code that allowed for very specific streets like Edgar Road. There's a whole bunch of houses on Edgar Road that have double frontages, and so they weren't supposed to be allowed to have a 6-foot fence. So we made changes so that we weren't seeing variances coming in for things that didn't seem to make sense. But we also get a lot of variances that come in just because people want what they want and they don't want to follow the regulations of the code. Subdivision standards. Subdivision, there's an entire chapter in the city code on subdivisions.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This, is that something that we should like that's looked at? I mean, I know they're asking for it in the wrong way, but is that a way of the community trying to communicate? I don't know, like maybe that they want a zoning change or like not a zoning change, an ordinance change. I don't know, like maybe that's overreaching a little bit,
So
but
the hard part is it's that when you have just a small handful asking
Right.
for what they want, we try not to make a zoning change based on one or two instances where the code doesn't work. That's why the Board of Adjustment is there.
yeah.
But I mean, the hard part is we're having, and here's an example. We're getting a lot of people who are saying, I can't meet the regulations for my detached garage. And the detached garage variance is they want a 3-car garage or an oversized garage or a garage that, you know, they don't want, you know, it's a sort of a question of, are you guaranteed to even get a garage in Webster Groves? And is it a hardship not to have a 2.5 or 3-car oversized garage with a family room above? So that kind of comes down to the question of, you know, what the overall community, you know, is required to follow in terms of providing a certain number of feet away from your neighbor's property line to give the ability for maintenance and to not overshadow their backyard that they want to enjoy with light and air by putting an oversized structure back in that back corner. So then that comes that question. So yes, I know we do look if we seem to get a lot of them, but we also try to remember that at a certain point it's personal preference of, you know, they could do an addition on their house for another family room, but instead they're insisting they have to have a family room over the garage, and then it doesn't meet the setbacks. And, you know, again, it's a pretty large structure overtaking and in some cases causing water problems or other issues to their neighbors.
And that does make sense because you're only hearing from somebody who's attempting to do something. You're not hearing from the rest of the population who's happy with the way things are. So
Exactly.
it can feel like a lot, but maybe it's really not a good proportion to be making decisions from.
Exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And then we spend a lot of time, and we've been trying this really hard. Like when someone comes in and says, this is what I'd like to do. And they're insistent because they say that they can't do it any other way. Staff does spend a lot of time trying to figure out ways to say, here's your various options. Like, for example, if someone says, well, I really want this really big garage. And I say, well, if you keep it under 672 square feet, you get to meet the 5-foot setback instead of in your zoning district, the 10-foot setback. And then you are allowed to have a second accessory structure. So instead of saying, I really need an oversized garage because I need to have all this extra storage for my garden tools. And then I say, well, but if you put it here and you make it this size, it can meet this setback. And then you can have a second accessory structure that's allowed to go up to this size. And then you don't need the variance. So we try to work with people on that.
That's very nice of
Yeah,
you.
they don't always listen. We try as hard as we can. I have to say, I feel like our numbers of variances did go down considerably after we really tried to focus on having those conversations. Yeah.
And Mara, if I can add.
Mhm.
So zoning is obviously intended to apply to the public in general, right? And variances and even CUPs are designed to apply to specific people. And so the difference is if, you know, and this is how it kind of comes back to CUPs. I know you guys don't deal with variances directly, but basically if the variance you're requesting is something that anybody else in the neighborhood would also have to request, at that point you're not talking about a specific issue with your property. You're talking about an issue you have with the zoning in the area in general. For as far as CUPs go, it's one of those where, you know, if you're going to be granting one CUP here, you need to make sure you're consistent then throughout the rest of them. So if you're granting variances and then denying variances and they're essentially the same thing, we run into issues if one of them wants to appeal. If you're granting CUPs and then denying them when it's again essentially the same thing, there's no substantial difference, we again run into issues there.
Definitely. I'm going to jump to the subdivision standards. So there's an entire chapter of the code on how you subdivide land. I get people all the time who are like, oh, I just want to give this land to my neighbor. Can't I just like deed it to them? The code requires that any form of whether you're adjusting a boundary between properties, whether you are trying to split the land into two lots, whether you're trying to sell off particular parcels, that it meets the basics of the zoning code. So you're not creating a lot that's not conforming, that you're not creating a lot that doesn't have access to it, that isn't developable, and that you're not creating problems with lots because you have tried to move a piece of land that shouldn't have been able to be moved. So the code has very specific regulations for what comes before you and what goes straight before council. Boundary adjustment plats and lot consolidations, those are ones that can be approved by staff. So you typically don't see them unless that change that they're trying to make causes a nonconformity on one or the other of the lots. And if there is a nonconformity, they have to go through the whole process as if they were doing a full subdivision in order for them to go to city council and ask for variances. You are very likely going to see maybe one or two of those coming forth in the next few months. I've been working with people for a while, trying to explain, I can't allow you to boundary adjust if the lot that you're adjusting isn't going to meet the basics of the zoning code, because you're creating now your own hardship by creating a lot now today, instead of leaving a legal lot that's there, and then now creating it, but not meeting the basics of the zoning code. So we see a lot of those. When it's a lot split, it goes straight to city council in order to approve a split of two lots and has an ordinance that gets approved with it. And then full subdivision plats go before the city council. Condominium plats go before staff, if I'm remembering all of mine correctly. And again, it regulates the creation of the lots and the provision of public infrastructure. So that code also talks about how wide of your right of way you need to have, if it's going to become a public street, what things you have to have. We don't allow for flag lots where someone takes, like if they have a really deep lot and they're like, well, I just want to sell this stuff back behind me. I don't want to use that anymore. So I'm just going to let people have this little driveway to get all the way back to this land behind. We don't allow flag lots. You have to have a frontage on a city street that is a certain width. And we can't leave orphan little lots. In fact, one of the ones that might come before you is there's this odd piece that over time kind of changed hands at different weird points in time, and now is part of one particular lot where it probably should have been part of someone else's lot on the backside street. So I'm working with them on that, and it would have to go all the way through Plan Commission and City Council, because the one lot that faces the one street's wide, and then the other lot is narrow, and it's too narrow for the zoning district. So they would have to come before you. The subdivision plat procedures start with a preliminary plat that's approved by or reviewed by the City Plan Commission. Even if it has disapproval, it moves before the city council, but it needs a supermajority of the vote. The final plat is reviewed by the city council, and the council has the ability to approve variances to the code in the approval of the plat. It's different than a variance before the Board of Adjustment. What it's essentially doing is saying, we're going to approve this plat, but there are some ways or difficulties. Like, for example, if someone can't really meet the minimum requirements of the zoning code, but yet your neighbors don't want to sell you any more land on either side of you, but yet you're trying to move a lot line and create a better configuration of those two lots, the city council can say, oh, that makes sense, I can approve that. Or there might be a section where the house was built in 1900, and as you're moving the lot line, you're increasing the setback because you're helping to make it come more in compliance, but maybe you can't come all the way in compliance. That the variance or the change that's being made in order to make the two lots equal, and someone wants to move their lot line between, it could come close but not meet everything. And so then the council can approve and say, yes, you can go ahead and approve this plat, but when you approve that plat, that structure, if it ever should get demolished, has to meet the current zoning, for example. And then we always tell people, when you go through the full subdivision plat procedures, you're creating a brand new lot. So by creating your own lot, hardships and variances and saying that you can't meet certain things really should not be something that they're moving forward with. So we try to be very clear with them as they're moving through that process that, they've created their own lot under the new configuration. They're not under an old lot that was created prior to 1956. Condominium plat procedures, is reviewed by City Planning Commission and City Council for the condo plat. So if we do get condo plat coming forward for the Euclid Elms project, it would come before you all first and then go to City Council. Other plat procedures, the lot split approval, that goes to City Council if all the requirements are met. They can only deny it if it does not meet the chapters of 50, 52, and 53 of the code. Boundary adjustments and lot consolidation, that's administrative approval by me. And we get quite a few of those. They're kind of odd bits and pieces here and there, mainly more lot consolidations when someone really wants to, there's an odd orphaned parcel and they want to make it a part of their lot. Development regulations. So in the zoning code, there's a lot of very specific things regarding uses, parking and loading, heights of structures, the area, which is the setbacks or the intensity of use, the lot coverage for floor area ratio, the coverage with just the footprints of structures. There's also some design standards in the code and performance standards in the code. Those are all important elements that you all have many times helped us to craft. In particular, for example, the performance standards. We did not have performance standards for our industrial districts. And so now we've been able to use that. We have, right now, we still have an ongoing issue with a particular business in industrial that is not meeting the performance standards. And there are single family residential nearby. Now we have something that we can enforce. So those standards help with noise and air and light pollution and those kinds of things that are important to the community. You all know this pretty well, our development process. It starts with staff research, meetings, application review. That analysis then creates an element that's ready to go on to an agenda with a staff report, goes to a public hearing, and then can sometimes go to multiple meetings before the Planning Commission. It then goes through to a report to the City Council and a hearing before the City Council. It goes to the City Council for 3 readings, so usually to 2 different meetings, goes to 1 meeting for the public hearing, and if they close it, a first and second reading. And then after that, there's a 2-week, usually, time frame before it goes to its 3rd reading. That gives the opportunity for any other issues or concerns that might come up between those 2 meetings. And then it'll eventually come to permit review. Whether if it's a plan district, you see a site development plan like you did this evening. If it is a something that requires some other special element to come back to you, it'll come back to you. In most cases, it goes straight to Architecture Review Board or goes for just permit review for building permits. So you have a couple roles. Your roles are legislative decisions and administrative decisions. So the legislative decisions are things that make or interpret the policies of the city. This can include, but not be limited to, your comprehensive plan adoption, which is a legislative decision, or any amendments to that, zonings, rezonings, zoning code amendments. These decisions are meant to apply equally to everyone in the community, not just to a very specific group or to an individual. The administrative decisions are more specific and have a direct effect on the rights of an individual or a small group of people. So when you do those administrative decisions, like a site development plan approval, that is impacting, just in this example from this evening, Narix Hall. It impacts them and their ability to develop on their property. A conditional use permit request is personal to that person who applies for it, and it applies to that particular use on that piece of property. So those administrative decisions involve that direct impact on the rights of the applicants. So the things that I always recommend that we think about very carefully is what your role is, that you need to follow meeting procedures. The chairperson and the staff have defined roles and how what our rules are for how testimony gets moved forward. You have the ability to make changes to how you do your procedures. I think you'll all remember I made a little bit of a reminder that when we went to Zoom during COVID, we had been sort of taking things in a different way when it comes to public comments. And we had been trying not to answer immediately in some ways because we didn't have that opportunity. We had a lot of comment coming in. In the past, we had done it in a slightly different way of how we had taken testimony, when we would answer, how we would answer. We had been trying at one point in time to make sure that if we could give an answer right away and not hold someone up to come back another month later, we would try to address that. So how that all works, using the chairperson to keep the meeting in order, helping to make sure that you all understand that the chairperson is supposed to help keep people from trying to speak for 15 minutes at a time, trying to help if the applicant needs additional information in terms of how we would work together. And so how to keep everyone also involved in the planning process, making sure that if there are people that need to be added on or given the opportunity to speak, that we take that opportunity, that if they're sitting here and they haven't filled out a speaker's card, we make sure to give that opportunity to make sure that they can speak if they would like to. The next thing that's most important is follow the law. So when in doubt, ask the city attorney or staff if you need additional advice. And I know sometimes what I try to remind people is try to ask that question ahead of time and not that night at the meeting as we're trying to get started, because that's the really difficult part of it is when, especially right now, when staff are shorthanded and there's only one person who's unlocking the doors, starting the Zoom meeting, also presenting, it can be a little bit more difficult, but I am completely open for any and all. Send me an email, give me a phone call, talk. If you need to send something to the city attorney, make sure that we know that you have a question or you have a concern, because that is really important. We want to get that addressed because you might not be the only one thinking about that. It might be that the entire commission is actually thinking about it, but no one else has taken the time to say or ask. So please do that. And that ties directly with use staff as a resource. We can provide, we're here to provide technical assistance. We're supposed to do the research and the analysis and the fact finding to help you make a decision. We try to bring you as much information as possible, but if you have an idea or a thought of other information that you need, let us know, because we might have a very easy way to provide that. Especially in our planning community, we have a St. Louis Metro Region American Planning Association. We have a state American Planning Association, and we have a national American Planning Association. In the past, when we were traveling more, I would do presentations at the national conferences. I did presentations at the state conferences and at the regional conferences. We go and we learn from each other, and we also have sort of email groups of other, if I want to ask, who else is doing something related to accessory dwelling units? I have a little group that I can send an email out, or it might be a topic of one of my monthly luncheons that I go to. So those are always important to remember to use us as a resource for those things. Do note, tasks are not assigned to staff by the Planning Commission. So you don't get to assign me to say, I really think we should do, a text code amendment for this, this, and this. It's the job of the city itself. So if there is an idea of something that you've heard about, you can pass that information to me, and I can pass that on to the city manager, and who can talk with the council about it, or can ask me to talk to the council about it, about a recommendation of something to look at. We can provide information to help make informed decisions, but you're not supposed to assign us with tasks, for example. The other thing that's really important is stay informed. I always say, read the packet and agenda prior to the meeting. I will tell you, you all are a great group when it comes to that. I really feel like there are good questions, and that you do read your packets before the meeting and don't just rely on the presentation the night of the meeting. I also suggest that there's important information in there that will help you familiarize yourself with the background. You should also be very familiar with the comprehensive plan. We will always include that information in our report. That will always be a section in our report about how it meets or doesn't meet the comprehensive plan. You are allowed to visit the development sites. You're allowed to drive by and visit them. We do say, please don't talk to applicants if they happen to be there. But I know that the city attorney will also say, technically you can. The one thing that's important is if they have a hearing before you, we want that information to be a part of that hearing, because something that you hear or learn from an applicant off-site isn't something that can be considered in your deliberations. And so we want to make sure that the hearing stays as something that provides everything that we need, both from the community, from the applicant, and then in your review.
Laura, can I
Yeah.
ask a question related to that? Sometimes I found it hard when we were going through something like Douglas Hill or any variation of that name, like to separate your role as a commissioner and like your role as a citizen of Webster Groves, like just someone who's generally interested. And this might be maybe more of a question for Peter, but is there kind of a general guideline of the bounds of what we can and can't say as someone who is a commissioner, but may also be interested in other pieces of a development that's going on? Like, for example, I think some of us had strong opinions about like the TIF portion of that, which wasn't what was before us, but we may have opinions on it. And you know, is there any limitation to what we can say on things that aren't, on pieces of things that aren't before us, but when there are pieces before us?
So Peter can probably answer that a little bit better than me, but I would say you have to keep your focus on what is under your purview. Because if you start bringing in other factors, that is a way that someone can come and appeal the decision because you haven't kept within your purview. If there are other items that are important, again, you can bring it up to staff and staff can let you know, whether it's the city attorney or myself, whether it's an item that is under your purview and can be discussed. And there's always other opportunities. For example, like the TIF commission had hearings. So you are still able to go listen to those. And there are ways that you can participate as a citizen,
Right.
as long as you are not coming in and saying, I'm a plan commission member and here's my, feedback. So there are ways to still do both.
Yeah, that's more what I'm asking on the latter end is like, if we'll use Douglas Hill as an example, right? So let's say that like we voted yes for it in here, but then there's more factors that went in front of city council. Is there any issues, or where is the line with us maybe coming to a city council meeting to say, even though I voted yes for this, I'd like you to vote no, and here's my reasons. And maybe I'm sure they should be unrelated to what was in front of us, but maybe for other reasons, such as the TIF, or for whatever reason, right? That we have an opinion.
So you definitely would not go forward and say, I know I voted yes as a planning commission member. You would just simply come to the meeting as a resident and state your address and state whatever your item is of concern.
Okay.
You would never say, well, I did vote this way as a planning commission member, but as a resident, I feel this way on this item. You need to completely separate those two from one another.
Okay,
And
so as long as we're
Laura,
not,
Oh, sorry, Peter's gonna say.
yeah.
No, that's all right. So one thing to keep in mind as part of the planning commission, your tasks are laid out in front of you, right? There are applications that come to the commission, and your job is to review the applications, review the ordinances, review the law if it comes up, and make a decision on that petition. And so if I'm making sure I'm parsing these two things, the petition in front of the planning commission was different than everything that would have been considered then in front of the council. And so if you're looking at this at a petition that you actually have a say in as part of the planning commission, and looking at it and say, well, they meet all of the qualifications, they meet all of the elements, the factors here. I don't think I have a good reason to vote against this. And so you vote yes. Mara, I think that there's a finer line there, but I think you could then go in front of the council and say, look, I think they met all these qualifications. That's why that's why I passed the planning commission. That's why we voted. But I disagree with this outside of and this is where it comes in as a citizen as opposed to a commissioner. I think that's a statement you can make. Just because you're on the commission doesn't mean you give up your ability to be a citizen in the city you live in. It doesn't give up your rights to go speak publicly when there are public hearings that are being held. But I do think, and this is what Mara was highlighting, I do think it's important that when you're speaking as a citizen, you say, I'm speaking as a citizen, right? It's just like any job anywhere, that if you are purporting to be making a statement on behalf of the city of Webster Groves, that's when we start to have issues. That's when you do end up, you do start forfeiting some of your First Amendment rights.
Okay, and I was just, I mean, for the record, using the TIF as an example. It's not like I had necessarily a feeling one way or the other strongly, but it was just, you know, like a clear demonstration of what
Sure.
went before us, like wasn't all of the factors of what went before city council. And I felt like it was a hard one to feel like I could have an opinion as a citizen because something was before us. So, okay, thank you.
And it's really easy to be sitting there and going, how is this going to affect me in its entirety, right? Let's start looking at everything. Let's make it. But your job as a commissioner is to look at what those factors we're laying out in that specific job. But again, you still have your rights as a citizen, as a resident of Webster Groves.
Okay, thank you.
And this comes back to focus on the big picture. So avoid being distracted by personalities, groups, or issues that have nothing to do with the merits of the agenda item. Make sure to focus on what is before you. I know sometimes you can get, you know, characters both from the public and from the applicant, but try to focus on what it is that they're asking for and the factors that you're supposed to review. I always remind people, don't form an opinion before knowing all the facts. You know, staff is going to provide you with a staff report. Staff is going to make a presentation. There's going to be testimony by the applicants. There's going to be testimony by neighbors. Those are all important, and recommendations may continue to change. You know, other factors that we were not made aware of at the time could change during the meeting. And we could then ask something to be held over while we continue to address what that issue might be. Also focus on the issues. Getting lost in details or items that have absolutely no bearing on what we are trying to review can really delay the process. So if someone starts focusing on, and I know this is just an example of one, there's always conversations about like, well, what is that going to cost? Like, how much is that housing going to be? Or how much is this? Or, you know, just details about something that has nothing to do with the zoning. We've got to keep away from that. It just delays our process because it's not something that's a factor that can be considered. And even though you might be really curious, it seems like a really cool idea to know about something in particular. We try to keep ourselves focused on what the matter is before us and how it's going to affect the decision that you're making on the planning or development item. Open communication, be objective, listen, ask questions. Staff always recommends if you have a question prior to the meeting, you send it to staff. If there's additional research that's needing to be done, that gives me more time to address that. So if anyone has, and so for example, when I was with a different city and we were like 5 times as busy, even though I feel like I'm really, really busy right now, but 5 times as busy, and there were 6 planners, we would make the Plan Commission give the comments or questions ahead of time to the planning director, and then the planning director would divvy it up between the 6 of us so that we would each be able to handle and get information so that we'd have it ready for the meeting. There's only me. So, you know, getting things to me in a timely manner, because I want to be able to give that information out to all of the members, because many times the question that one member has really is important for all the members to know. So then just a little thing about what is staff's role. Our role is to prepare reports, do the findings relative to development applications, whether it applies to the comprehensive plan, whether there are zoning standards, subdivision standards, development standards, whatever that's going to apply. We do plan review, and then off down to the side are all these other things that we have to be knowledgeable about. Landscaping, parking, open space, site relationships, building design, architectural details, lighting, circulation, access, stormwater, tree preservation, site buffers, and signage. So each of those are things that might not play a role in every project, but they do play a role in most projects. I make a little bit of jokes about things that our work includes, but is not limited to current planning. Long range planning. We are liaisons to various boards and commissions and committees. We do permitting, so zoning review on projects that don't even come before you. On any given day, I'm looking at and confirming that the zoning works on, probably a dozen or so, whether it's, driveways, retaining walls, additions to houses, detached garages. We also do zoning enforcement. So if we get a call or a complaint about something that might be zoning related, whether it's a business has started to move into some place, or someone who has put chickens in their backyard and don't have a chicken permit. Those are things that we also do in terms of enforcement. We also do research assignments for the city council, as well as just general research assignments for things that we're working on. We're also supposed to do some sort of forecasting, maybe forecasting what we think we're going to get in terms of new homes or building permits or other things related to budget. We also do site inspections for some things that are related to zoning matters when our building inspectors are more doing the building code. And we also deal with bonds and escrows with the city for both trees and larger projects and landscaping. Architectural Review Board. The Architectural Review Board looks at a bunch of different things when it relates to, what kind of things come before them. We don't get wild and crazy things like some of these pictures that I'm showing, but we do get quite a few different projects. Some communities only do architectural review for very, very large, like commercial projects or entire subdivisions. Our community does take on smaller additions and other things. And we do get a lot that goes before the Architectural Review Board. Signage. Signage is always fun. Signage doesn't really come before you at all, but is actually another thing that comes to us on a daily basis sometimes, whether it's temporary signs, whether it's permanent signs. The sign code is one of the ones that I try to avoid making amendments to, because there's so many legalities on the national level of things that have happened, whether it's a Supreme Court decision or some other decision that makes changes to the code. And it's really hard about the differences between freedom of speech and then what is allowed. And typically we look at what's called time, place, and manner. So the time that it's allowed to stay there, the place or location, and the manner in which it is built. So we kind of look at all of those when it comes to signage. We also deal with, in my department, construction and site inspection, permit review, project management, work order requests for complaints from neighbors. A lot of it is neighbor on neighbor issues that we deal with, but we do deal with that quite a bit. And then in general, we look at public health, safety, and general welfare. So we do deal with, hoarding properties or properties that are unsafe. We deal with just in general different things that can happen within a community, but we look at the general welfare of the community when we're addressing some of these things. And now, after you've seen all that fun, we're going to get more to legal matters, and we have a couple slides, but I think Peter's going to sort of talk through some of the legal issues that are important for you to know. But before he starts, any other questions on any of the things that I brought up? Okay, take it away, Peter.
Okay. So we've overlapped a little bit. Some of this stuff's already come up a little bit, but I don't believe we've talked about the Sunshine Law yet. So the Sunshine Law, similar to the Federal Freedom of Information Act, is it's a state statute that deals with open records that are held by a governmental body. And so that how that pertains to the Planning Commission is that the meetings themselves and the documents and everything related to the meetings is subject to the Sunshine Law. And so the general rule is unless otherwise closed, and it has to be closed pursuant to the statutes, everything is an open record. That includes things like emails that are sent back and forth between the planning commissioners or the city staff and a commissioner. It includes things like the minutes and the PowerPoint slides that we're looking at right now, and anything that can be documented as far that pertains to what we're doing here tonight. The goal is obviously by opening these records, there's some transparency, it promotes accountability, and it assures the public that they know what's going on within their city. It's like Mara's put there, it's to maintain the integrity of the government. So part of everything we do listed there is, posting the agenda, public hearing notifications. All those are pursuant to the Sunshine Law. What that really means for you is that be aware that what we put in our meeting, what is in the minutes, what goes in your emails, all those sorts of things are subject to public scrutiny. They're open records because there is generally no reason to close something like that. And if there's any specific questions about what could be closed or why things could be closed, I'd be happy to go through it with you. There's 27 things that are listed out as kind of not an all-inclusive, but general reasons why items can be closed, all on chapter 610. It's very exciting. You go to the next slide, Mara.
Oh, sorry.
So public hearings, this is where we did overlap. And generally, just like the reason why the Sunshine Law exists, the public hearings here exist because we want the public to have a role and to be the process to be open. We want what we're doing to have public comments, to have public input, and to be transparent. So to that end, the city is required to provide notice of is it 24 hours, Mara?
24 hours for the agenda, correct?
Correct. So 24 hours before the hearing. Usually it's done before then, and then we have to provide public comment within I guess there's exceptions to it, but within the hearings that are brought in front of the Planning Commission. So again, the purpose here is that the residents of the city of Webster Groves, the people who are trying to bring business into the city of Webster Groves, that they can see what the process is that's going before this commission. Those ex parte communications that's listed there, and Mara did bring this up. I don't believe there's any issue with commissioners, going out on their own and looking at the property. Certainly, you want to be familiar with whatever it is you're dealing with. I don't even think there's an issue with you talking to neighbors. And frankly, there could be no issue with you talking to an applicant if you happen to run into them. Where the issues arise is where there's information that's shared, where there's discussions that are had that influence the commission and then aren't raised at the commission level. So the place where this becomes important is if we have to defend ourselves in court, if we go forward with a hearing and somebody decides they're aggrieved because of the commission's decision, and we have to go in front of the court, we have to ultimately present to a judge why the decision that was made was pursuant to the law. And we can use anything that's presented to the commission in supporting that decision. When we have things that aren't presented to the commission, even if they're knowledgeable, or even if you're knowledgeable of them, and those could be things like you live next door to a property or you drive past it every day, and those sorts of things should be raised during the hearing so that we have a record of them being said. Again, we want to avoid any impropriety or even appearance of impropriety based on discussions that are held behind closed doors, discussions that are held privately, those sorts of things. And I know it all sounds very serious and it's truly it's easily avoidable, but it's something to be to consider when you're in the position you're in. That kind of leads right into social media as well. So the city policy here, the city's stance here is that we shouldn't open up discussion of the matters that are going to be in front of the commission in any sense on a social media site or open to public comment in that way. We have this process in place. This is where the applicant petitioner brings in a case, comes in front of the commission. The commission hears the applicant, hears public comment, hears comment from staff, and then makes a decision. Again, when we've got things that are influencing people from social media and That is, I think, truly the easiest way that somebody can be influenced in this day and age. We want to avoid, again, any sense of impropriety, and that can be very public. And so it's not as if, if you're having a closed door conversation, at least that's not noticeable for everybody that wants to look upon it. Social media is going to be visible to lots of people, and that sort of impropriety, even if unintentional, can certainly arise, or at least appear. Do I have one more slide, Mara?
That was kind of the last slide, unless there were other things that anyone has particular legal questions on.
Nope.
Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns?
Well, Mara, I had a question as it relates to just the plan. You mentioned perhaps redoing the comp plan. Is that something that's already in the budget for your department? Is that a city council budget item? And are you really not at that point of discussion yet? What's the thought process on the revamped comp plan?
So definitely not in this year's budget. I'm not sure yet, and we're discussing. That's about as far as I've gotten with that one.
Okay, now I was curious.
Yeah.
I'm obviously all for it. I think it's been a while, so I would be pleased to be a part of that process.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, we will make sure that process involves the planning commission to the fullest extent when we get to that point. But it is definitely not in this year's budget.
Okay. Thank you, Mara, for
I
putting
have
this.
another comment.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
When I first got on the commission, I went to a seminar. And at the seminar, they really drilled into your head to ask a lot of questions, both sides. Whether you already know that you really like this, try and go opposite so that you explore all the things, because if it ever does go to court, they're going to find out whether or not did you really decide, or was it already chosen for you? That's my only comment.
Anybody else? Well, thank you, Mara, for putting this together.
Yeah,
And
great.
this was a good night, I guess, since it was a light
It was the
agenda item.
perfect night.
Yeah, and
We
we
had
didn't
nothing
have
else
to do
really
it.
on.
But yes, I think what you said, questions are always good, and knowing that we can let you know ahead of time, email them in an appropriate time frame,
Yeah.
not 2 hours before the meeting,
Yeah.
or things like that. But also I'd like to say, if there's something that you think may be of interest to us, send it along. I mean, I think everybody would like to have things just to read, just like you said, to
Yeah.
keep current.
Yeah,
too.
definitely. And I know I've passed a few of these on to city council, and I haven't as often passed it on to planning commission, and I'll try to do it more often. Right now, our local or our regional St. Louis American Planning Association, it used to be that it was, you went to lunch in person, your speaker came to your luncheon, and it was $15 for members to attend the luncheon. Well, because it's just been so much easier to Zoom, they've been Zooming those meetings monthly, and it's free. So I do need to think a little bit. I've passed a couple on to the council because they've been about affordable housing and about missing middle housing. But I will try more often, if it looks like it's an interesting topic, to just send it on in case any of you want to attend, because you can do it via Zoom over your lunch. I sit at my desk with a sandwich and, listen. And it's a really good opportunity to hear about some of the things that I'm hearing to continue my credits for my certification on a sort of a regular basis.
Okay. Thank you. Our next regular meeting is July the 11th, 2022. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mara,
Second.
I'm sorry. I
go
guess
ahead.
I did have a question.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, it kind of come up in Douglas Hill, good example, if I got some expertise, say, related to, say, that traffic study that was prepared for Douglas Hill, or issues related to the flooding. You know, I got a bunch of initials after my name and reputation, say I'm supposed to know about those things. And I'm seeing things in there that I'm like, it's not right. You know, I struggle sometimes with where, like you talked about getting into the details, where I struggle with where kind of my opinion ends, and I appreciate that it needs to end as compared to where the role as a plan commissioner and what I'm really voting on, I guess, at times. So I don't know if maybe Peter, you could just speak to that real quick. If that makes sense.
So I know, I think I'm understanding that you're asking, so, because it does get confused sometimes in the questions and in the applications and what's brought up, but are you saying there are times where when voting comes up, that you're not exactly sure what the issue that's being voted upon is?
No, I think
No.
actually his concern is that, so he is an engineer with
Has some
MS
expertise, but yeah.
He
his
has, he
question-
has a particular expertise
Okay,
that he wants. So the problem that we run into, so for example, with Douglas Hill, is that the items that they bring forward are items to help us create regulations they need to follow. So even if there might be a particular report that comes before us, that report is supposed to help guide us in what we want them to do.
Sure.
It isn't necessarily a final report. And I think Mike struggled with wanting to get every I dotted and T crossed in a report that was something that was supposed to help guide us on regulations for the
okay.
development, not necessarily the
okay,
exact like site development plan permit level of what we were at.
sure.
And that's
Well,
where he was struggling.
Yeah, Mike, here's the quick answer there is that they're bringing the application, they're bringing the petition. When it comes in front of the commission says, you know, we'd really like to see this before we vote on it. And if they say no, you've got what you've got, right? If it's not enough, if it's not something you see as sufficient, if you think that there is more that they should have done in order to convince you that you should be voting to approve, then you vote no. I mean, it's as simple as that. Every time that the commission goes back and says, you know, I think this would be useful, I think we need to see this, you can always vote to table, you can always those sorts of things. But you know, the short answer is, I think I've said this a few times tonight, but you're only voting on what the applicant has brought in front of you.
Did that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, that helps. And the training definitely helps. I just want to reiterate, a lot of people said thanks. I'm sorry to drag out the last minute. So I believe there was a
Oh, that was
motion.
a-
I will second the
No.
motion to adjourn.
No. Not a, they're all good questions, Mike. Okay. I think Maddie had the original motion and I guess Mike just seconded it.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. All right. All the ayes, all in favor.
Aye.
Aye. All right. All noes. All right, motion approved. We're adjourned till July 11th.
July 11th.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good 4th of July. Ruth.
No,
Oh my
Can't
gosh,
afraid.
that
You
seems
can't afraid.
so far away.
I don't know yet.
It's only a few weeks.
I don't know.
Ah, that was a very thorough.